The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip in the dry August air. $1. $1 for the old Rembrandt Ranch. Do I hear more? No. Going once. A dust devil swirled across the dead yard. Going twice sold. To the man in the black hat. The crowd chuckled. Someone spat. Damn fool just bought himself a patch of cursed earth. Caldershaw barely blinked dot. He stood tall and alone under the hot Wyoming sun. Hands leathered from a lifetime of ranching grief carved deep into the lines of his face. He nodded once, took the keys, and turned without a word. The townsfolk parted, more curious than kind. What's a man want with a ranch that don't grow nothing but bones? Someone muttered behind him. Calder didn't answer. He hadn't come for the land. He'd come for the silence. The horse moved slow as syrup up the winding trail. The old Rembrandt Ranch sat nestled between two sun-scorched hills, the fence hanging. By a prayer, barn leaning like an old drunk. Calder took it in like a battlefield survivor, studying wreckage, calculating what could be saved, what should be burned. The wind was too still. He dismounted, boots crunching dry earth. The house sat like a ghost at the edge of the clearing boards, sun-bleached, porch cracked. And yet, smoke curled from the chimney. Calder's eyes narrowed. He dropped the reins and stepped forward, hand resting near the revolver at his hip. Quiet, too quiet. No birds, no cattle. Just that faint sound, children giggling. The screen. Door creaked open before he reached it. A shotgun leveled at his chest. He froze. Behind the barrel stood a woman no older than 30, dust on her cheeks, fire in her eyes. Her hands shook, but the determination didn't. Behind her, in the shadows, 5 children clung to each other, their eyes wide, cheeks hollow. You take one more step, the woman said, voice tight, and I swear to God, I'll put you down. Calder raised his hand slowly. Easy, ma'am? You with the law? No. Then turn around. You ain't welcome here. This land belongs to me now. No, she hissed, stepping forward, gun never wavering. This land belongs to the dead and the desperate. We're both. Calder said nothing. He didn't look at the barrel. He looked at her eyes. They were red-rimmed, exhausted, defiant. Name's Caldershaw, he said finally. Paid $1 for this ranch at the courthouse an hour ago. I've got the deed. That piece of paper don't mean squat here. You squatting? The kids flinched at the word. The woman's chin lifted. My husband died out here. Mining accident. No one would hire a widow with 5 mouths to feed. So we came here. It was empty. We took it. Simple as that. How long you been here? Since the last snow. Calder exhaled. This land's dry. Cursed, some say. Only. Curse, I see, is the men who walk away. One of the children, a boy no older than 10, stepped forward with a bent spoon and declared, We got beans. You want some? The woman turned on him. Back inside, Will. But Calder smiled, soft. Thank you, son. The kid grinned toothless and vanished inside. The shotgun finally lowered. The woman's shoulders sagged. You really bought this place? She asked quietly. Yeah. For how much? $1. She snorted bitterly. Overpaid. That night, Calder sat by the fence post, hat tipped over his eyes. The sun dipped behind the hills, bleeding orange across the sky. Crickets began to chirp. The cabin behind him was alive, soft laughter, the scrape of pans, someone humming. She hadn't offered him a plate, but he didn't expect one. He didn't come for company. He came for quiet, for distance. But fate didn't give a damn what he came for. The door creaked again. She stepped out, barefoot in the dirt, arms folded. You fixing to throw us out? She asked. No. Why not? Don't see the point. You're already here. Most men wouldn't let a woman squat on their land. Most men ain't me. She stepped closer, still cautious. Name's Ellie Rose. He nodded. She looked up at the sky, full of stars. My husband said he'd build me a porch swing. Never got to it. Took the wrong shift underground. Sorry. I'm not, she whispered. He was a drinker, a good man when he was sober. But sober wasn't often. They were quiet for a while. Then Ellie said, kids are half wild. You don't want a running around your land. Let them run. You don't strike. Me as the merciful type. I ain't, Calder said, but I've buried enough to know what's worth fighting. 2 nights later, Calder found a rabbit on his doorstep. Skinned, seasoned, wrapped in cloth. No note. No noise. Just a gift. He cooked it on a small fire and chewed in silence. In the window, one of the children watched him from the shadows, wide-eyed and curious. When Calder looked up, the child vanished, but not before smiling. The next morning, Calder found his fence had been patched. Sloppily, but patched. That evening, he left a bucket of fresh water at their door. A silent truce began. A week passed. Calder fixed the barn roof. Ellie Rose chopped wood. The kids ran wild, laughing like wolves in the tall grass. They built a game of hide-and-seek with Calder's tools, leaving him grumbling under his breath and them howling with laughter from behind barrels and beams. Then, on a Sunday, came the law. The deputy rode up slow, dust trailing behind his horse. Like smoke. Calder was mending a wheel. Ellie Rose stood frozen on the porch, a child on her hip. The deputy dismounted with a sigh. Heard you got squatters on your property. Calder didn't look up. They're not squatters. Beg your pardon? They're with me. That ain't how it works, Calder. Calder stood. Don't care how it works. The deputy looked between them, unease on his face. I'll give you a week. Then I gotta file the notice. As he rode off, Ellie turned to Calder, eyes burning. Why'd you lie for us? Calder picked up his hammer. Didn't lie. But he looked her dead in the eye. You and those kids? You belong here more than the ghosts do. Ellie's mouth parted slightly. No words came. She stepped off the porch, close enough to touch his arm, but she D-I-D in single quotes T. She simply. Syed, we can help. We ain't freeloaders. I know. She hesitated. You want beans tonight? Calder finally smiled, just a little. Long as there ain't coffee beans in 'em. That night, inside the cabin lit by oil lamps, Calder sat at a crooked table with 5 loud children and 1 quiet woman. The stew was thin. The laughter was loud. For the first time in years, he didn't eat alone. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie. Inside, something warm had begun to grow. The rooster crowed at dawn, and Calder was already up, tossing hay into the barn, sweat rolling down his temples before the sun even touched the hills. He hadn't meant to care. He hadn't meant to stay. But now the barn had a new roof. The pump had clean water again, and 5 sets of little footprints danced in the dust like they'd always belonged here. Calder spat and muttered, "Damn kids," as he stepped on a carved wooden chicken left right in front of the barn door. A crude carving, likely whittled by one of the boys. It had button eyes and a lopsided beak. He tossed it onto a barrel, then picked it up again and brushed the dust off. Inside the cabin, chaos was breakfast. 1 girl screamed because someone stole her sock. A toddler cried because he wanted sugar. One of the boys was trying to fry eggs with the back of a shovel over the fireplace. Ellie Rose walked through it all like a woman dancing on a tightrope. Calm, sharp, she turned at the knock. Calder stood in the doorway, holding a tin of coffee and a rough sack of flour. I figured you could use these, he said. She blinked. You're not just dropping it on the porch? You let me eat your beans, he said with a straight face. She smirked. You say that like it's a favor. Could have poisoned me. Still might. He chuckled a rare, rusted sound. The kind of laugh that sounded like it hadn't come out in years. Come in, she said finally. That morning, Calder saw the inside of the cabin for the first time. That it was rough but warm. The kids had hung dried flowers and pine cones on the walls. Blankets patched with different kinds of cloth lay on every bed. A rusted lantern flickered in the corner. He knelt to tie the boot of the youngest, a girl with wide brown eyes and a nose too small for her face. She just stared at him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Uni." "You always this quiet?" "No, but Mama says I should be when I'm thinking. And I'm thinking you look like a mean grandpa." Calder blinked. Ellie choked on her coffee. "I ain't a grandpa," he muttered. "Well, you got grandpa hair," Uni said. Over the next few days, the rhythm settled. Calder fixed the fence. The boys followed him, mimicking every move like he was some kind of dusty hero from a dime novel. "Mr. Cow," the eldest boy said one afternoon, "you ever shoot a man?" Calder didn't answer. The boy Will pressed again. "I mean, you look like you have." "Go fix that post," Calder said. Will obeyed, but didn't stop glancing at him, wide-eyed with a mix of fear and respect. Calder didn't blame him. He had shot a man once, but that was another life, another state, another wound. That night, Ellie and Calder sat on the porch together for the first time. She handed him a chipped cup of coffee, taught the girls to boil water. "God help us," she said, sipping hers. Calder didn't respond. Right away, he watched the stars, the same way he used to before everything went dark inside him. "You always been this strong?" he asked finally. Ellie gave him a look. "You mean stubborn?" "No, I mean strong." She was quiet a moment. "I didn't have a choice. That's the kind of strength that matters." Later that week, Calder returned from town with supplies and a surprise, a small bag of licorice sticks. He left them on the porch and didn't say a word. That night, the boys tackled him near the barn yelling, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," until he threatened to throw all 5 of them in the water trough. They dared him. He did it. All of them screamed and laughed. Ellie leaned on the porch post, watching with tears in her eyes and a hand on her heart. That night, for the first time, Calder heard the cabin full of music. Ellie sang softly to her children a hymn, broken and sweet. He didn't go inside, but he sat outside till the singing stopped. Then came the day the deputy returned. This time, he didn't come alone. The sheriff rode beside him, his boots polished, and his eyes cold. Calder met them at the gate. "Afternoon," he said, voice flat. "You know why we're here," said the sheriff. "You've had your week." "They're not squatters," Calder said. The sheriff raised a brow. "You sayin' that woman and her kids are legally yours now?" Calder's jaw tightened. "I'm saying they live here, on land I own." "Marriage certificate?" "No." "Then it's trespassing." Ellie stepped onto the porch. The children gathered behind her. Calder turned, then took 2 steps forward until he was standing in front of them. He looked the sheriff square in the eye. "They're mine. That's all you need to know." The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "You're macking this hard, Shaw." "I can make it harder," Calder said, resting his hand on the butt of his revolver. Tension crackled like lightning. The deputy muttered, "Sheriff, we don't need a fight." The sheriff sneered. "You've got 1 week to get it legal, or I come back with more men." Then he turned and rode off. That night, Ellie slammed her fists on the table. "You shouldn't have done that." "I didn't do it for you." Calder growled. "I did it because they deserve better." "And what happens when they take them? When they arrest me?" "Then I go too." Ellie froze. The room fell silent. Kids listening from behind curtains. She stared at him. "What do you want from us, Calder?" He didn't answer right away. Then, not a damn thing. Except maybe a reason to stay. Ellie's anger cracked like dry wood in a fire. She whispered, "I don't want to run anymore. You won't." The next day, they rode to town together. People stared at a woman with 5 kids, a loner with a black hat, together on the same wagon. They went into the general store, then the blacksmith. Finally, they stood outside the preacher's little white church. Ellie shook her head. "We can't fake this." Calder said, "I don't think it's fake anymore." Her eyes welled up, but she nodded that night, after the kids were asleep. Calder found her on the porch again. She was holding an old envelope. "My husband left this," she whispered. It was all he left. She opened it and read aloud. "If you find a man who puts the kids first, trust him, even if he's broken." She looked up at Calder. "You're broken." He nodded. "I know. But so am I." He reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "You fix fences," she whispered. "You fix hearts," he replied. The sky turned dark like spilled ink over the plains. Thunder cracked in the distance, low and warning. Calder looked up from the fence post he was hammering and muttered under his breath, "It's coming." From the porch, Ellie called out, "That roof won't hold through a bad one." Calder wiped sweat from his brow and glanced toward the cabin. Ellie stood with the baby in one arm, her other hand shielding her eyes from the rising wind. The kids were pulling in the wash, stumbling, and giggling as the wind snatched a sock skyward like a white flag to the heavens. "Barn first," Calder said, tightening the last nail. "Roof will hold if we patch the back corner." Will, the oldest boy, jumped off the porch. "I'll help you, Mr. Cal. Grab a tarp. We don't have time for slow hands." By sundown, the sky was swollen and angry. Ellie was pulling blankets over the windows while the younger children huddled near the fireplace, eyes darting. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled so loud it shook the water in the cooking pot. Calder slammed the barn door shut and turned the latch just as the first wall of rain hit. The wind screamed like it had lost something. "Ellie!" he shouted, bursting into the cabin. "We need to move the kids to the cellar." She was already herding them toward the trap door in the floor. One of the twins, Sadie, refused to let go of her wooden doll. Another screamed at the sound of the thunder and wouldn't move. Eunie held her little brother like a mother 10 years older than she was. Then lightning hit Dot. It struck the far edge of the barn with a crack like the earth splitting in two. Flames bloomed instantly, wild and orange against the night. Calder didn't hesitate. He turned and ran into the rain. The fire hissed where water touched it, but it spread too fast. The back corner of the barn, where the hay had been stacked, was now glowing red. "Calder, no!" Ellie screamed from the porch, clutching the baby to her chest. "I've got tools in there," he shouted over the storm. "And horses." But before he could reach the barn, a streak of motion caught his eye. Will. The boy had broken free and sprinted toward the fire, trying to save a goat they'd taken in days earlier. "Will!" Calder's voice ripped through the storm. The boy disappeared inside. Calder charged forward, heart hammering. He tore open the barn door, smoke choking his lungs, and found Will dragging the bleeding goat by its horns, coughing violently. Calder didn't think. He lifted the boy under one arm, grabbed the goat's rope with the other, and ran through the flames. Outside, Ellie screamed as they burst from the smoke. Will collapsed on the ground, sobbing, eyes red. Calder bent over him, coughing, singed at the sleeves and blackened with soot. The barn roof collapsed behind them with a groan and a hiss of fire. That night, with the barn gone and the fire finally out, the children huddled in the cellar, wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind ease into a bitter whisper. Calder sat on the porch steps, Hair wet, hands blistered, clothes ruined. Ellie knelt beside him and whispered, "You didn't have to go in." "I did," he rasped. "That boy's. One of mine now. He just doesn't know it yet." She placed a warm hand on his shoulder. "And what about me?" He looked at her. Lightning flickered again on the horizon, but it wasn't from the storm. Any more. Something deeper stirred between them. "You're not just someone who needed saving," he said. "You're the reason I remember how." The next morning, a letter arrived. The preacher delivered it himself, tucking it in two. Calder's hand like a funeral notice. Calder opened it with a grim expression. His shoulders tightened. Ellie watched from the cabin door, waiting. "It's from Wyoming Territorial Records," he muttered. "Our paperwork. It's been delayed. What does that mean?" Ellie asked, stepping forward. "It means," he said, "we're not legally married. Not yet." Her breath caught. "They'll be here before the end of the week, won't they?" she whispered. He nodded. "We've got 3 days." That day, the townsfolk talked. The burned barn, the fake marriage, the children, the widow with wild eyes. Some called it shameful. Others called it inspiring. But one man, Mr. Dobbs, the land agent who'd sold the Rembrandt Ranch for $1, marched into the sheriff's office with a signed affidavit. He demanded the eviction be carried out immediately, arguing Calder had lied about his circumstances. The sheriff sat behind his desk, eyes narrowed. "Man's done more to that land in 2 weeks than any owner in 2 years," he said. "Law's the law." Dobbs snapped. The sheriff sighed, and he signed the order. That night, the ranch was quiet. The sky cleared, and the stars spilled like spilled sugar across black velvet. Calder sat on the porch sharpening a blade, rage simmering under his calm. Ellie came out and sat beside him. "What if we run?" she asked quietly. "No," he said. "We've done it before. We can vanish." "I ain't running," he said. "Not again." "Then what?" He looked at her. "I fight." The next day, Calder rode out alone. He went to the only man who could help the father of his dead wife, Clayton Miles. They hadn't spoken in 5 years. Clayton opened the door with a shotgun in his hand. "You got guts coming here," he growled. "I need papers. I owe you nothing. She's a widow with 5 kids. I ain't a skin. For kindness, just decency. You married her? Not yet." Clayton stared long. Then he said, "My daughter loved you, even if I never understood why. Come inside. Let's talk." Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the deputy arrived with the eviction order. Ellie stood her ground, heart pounding, the kids behind her like a wild pack. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. "I ain't moving," she said. "You'll be arrested." Then, "Do it." Just as the deputy stepped forward, a second rider appeared on the ridge. It was Calder. Behind him rode the preacher, and in his hands the preacher held papers. The deputy paused. Calder dismounted and handed over the documents. "Filed, stamped, legal," he said. "You want to check with the judge? Be my guest." The deputy read it, nodded, and left. Later that night, Ellie and Calder stood side by side as the children chased fireflies around the porch. "You rode to your wife's father?" she asked softly. "I told him I'd buried enough." "And?" He said maybe it was time to plant something new. She touched his hand. Then she leaned in and whispered, "There's something I never told you." He looked at her. She pulled something from her apron. It was a folded scrap of fabric, a piece of his late wife's shawl. "She gave this to me once, when I was just 16. She helped me when my first baby got sick. Sighed, 'Watch the sky before it breaks.' I never forgot it." Calder stared, breath leaving his lungs. "She said that to me too," he whispered, "the day she died." Ellie's eyes welled up. Maybe we were meant to find each other, she said. Calder took the shawl, held it to his chest, and nodded. Double quotes. No, he said softly. We were meant to finish what she started. The sun rose slow over the Rembrandt Ranch, casting long shadows across the scorched earth where the barn once stood. But there was life here now. Laughter from the creek. Tiny boots stamping muddy footprints across the porch. The smell of frying. Cornbread. A soft hum from inside the Cabanelli's voice, light and steady, weaving through the morning like thread through fabric. Calder sat on the porch steps, mug in hand, watching Will help Sadie braid her hair. The boy wasn't the same one who ran into a burning barn. He was stronger now, calmer, like the land had rooted him. Behind them, Ellie appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. You're up early, she said, brushing hair from her face. Calder nodded. Never got used to sleeping in, even after the war. She sat beside him and said nothing for a long time. Finally, she spoke. What happens now? He glanced toward the field. We rebuild. Plant oats come spring. Maybe run cattle, if we can find good ones cheap. I meant with us, she said softly. He looked at her, eyes tired but kind. That depends. On what? On whether you're still here by then. Ellie tilted her head. I stayed through fire, storms, lawmen, and 5 kids bouncing. Off the walls. You think I'm leaving now? Calder almost smiled. Almost. Good, he said. I'd miss the noise. They started rebuilding the barn together. Not every day was labor. The kids pitched in, where they could, gathering nails, handing hammers, dragging beams with all the might in their little arms. One morning, Will walked over and handed Calder a folded piece of paper. What's this? Calder asked. It's a design, Will said proudly, for the new barn. I drew it myself. Calder opened it and stared. The drawing was rough but clear. A barn with a big loft, 2 animal stalls, and at the top a long beam with a swing. That's for you and Ma, Will said. You need somewhere to sit when you get old. Calder blinked, throat tightening. You did good, son. Will beamed. Calder looked away before the kids saw the tears. In town, rumors had shifted. People still talked, but differently now. The preacher, after signing their marriage papers, began referring to Ellie as Mrs. Shaw. The blacksmith offered them spare hinges for the barn doors. Even Dobbs, the bitter land agent, grudgingly tipped his hat when they rode past the general store. They're starting to see it, Ellie whispered one day as they loaded grain. That we're not ghosts anymore. No, Calder said. We're roots now. But even in peace, the past has a way of clawing back. One afternoon, a wagon creaked up to the ranch. Calder saw it from the hill, narrowed his eyes, and rode down slow. Man who stepped down wore a long gray coat and sorrow in his eyes. Name's Grady Cole, the stranger said. I was Ellie's husband's brother. Ellie stepped out, shielding her eyes from the sun. Grady? Came to find you, he said. Didn't know you were still alive till I passed through Laramie and heard a preacher talking about the ranch widow with 5 kids and a new husband. I didn't know you survived, Ellie said, voice low. I did, Grady said, but I lost everything. Came to pay respects, and maybe ask if you'd take me on. I can work. I don't expect charity. Calder's hand rested on his hip, but not on the gun. Ellie looked at him. Silent. Calder nodded. There's room, he said. Grady's eyes softened. Thank you. That night, Calder stood at the edge of the field, watching the barn frame rise against the twilight. Ellie stepped beside him. Strange, isn't it? She said. How many people come back from the dead out here? He didn't speak for a while. Then, you brought this place back to life. No, she whispered. We all did. Weeks passed. Grady proved himself. Quiet, dependable, hard-working. The barn took shape. Ellie finally got her porch swing. The kids built a treehouse in the lone oak. The ranch wasn't just surviving. It was becoming something new, something stubborn and alive. One evening, as cicadas sang and lightning bugs blinked through the grass, Calder stood at the edge of the porch, gazing toward the horizon. Ellie stepped out, slipping her arms around his waist. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked. "I thought I'd be alone forever," he said. "And a man like me didn't get a second shot." "You weren't wrong," she replied. "But you gave us one, so we gave you one back." He turned to her. "I was dead when I got here. You just needed someone to shake the dust off. Your soul." He leaned in, kissed her forehead. "Then, thank God, it was you." The next morning, they hosted a small gathering, neighbors, townsfolk, and friends. They opened the new barn with a prayer and a pot of stew big enough to feed 20. Preacher raised a toast. "To new roots on old land," he said, "and to the family brave enough to plant them." After sunset, Calder sat on the porch swing, a sleeping baby in his arms. Ellie leaned against him, watching the stars. "You know," she whispered, "I always wondered if this land was cursed." He looked around the rebuilt barn, the laughing kids, the smoke curling from the chimney. "It was never cursed," he said. "It was just waiting for the right people." He bought the ranch for $1. But the woman, the 5 kids, the laughter, the love, that came at a price far more precious and worth every broken piece he gave to get it back. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments. Would you have let her stay?